Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so I represent Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is one of world's leading cloud computing platforms. Essentially, organizations, enterprises of all sizes are moving to the cloud. But here, really, I'm not really here to talk about AWS. What I'm here to talk about is, I think the question about why should I be moving to cloud is, according to us, the way we see it and the way we are hearing from our customers is pretty much done. It's a given that you would be moving to the cloud, or you're already on the cloud, or you'll be making plans to move to the cloud. The question is more about the what and the how of cloud rather than why cloud itself, right? And that's something that I would like to address with the prism of financial services and NBFCs. Talk about from an NBFC point of view, if you look at the market, I think it's important to understand where the market stands today, and then look at where could cloud really add a competitive advantage to you, right? So let's just quickly look at where the market is headed. A quick trend with respect to financial services, if you look at it, in the first 40-odd years, we had about 14-odd new banks. Now, in the last 3 years, we've added about 21-odd new banks, right? Both small finance banks and payments banks. If you look at NBFCs from an origin point of view, historically, NBFCs have been started to address a particular segment of the market which possibly banks were not addressing so well. As an example, you had an auto manufacturer, you had a large auto business. How can I service my customers and give them loans through my dealer network? You are a large infrastructure player. You've got a large infra business already. Can I do infrastructure lending? Right? So there was some amount of legacy and extension of a business due to which a lot of NBFCs were started in the first 30, 40 odd years. Which means that it was all about finding a niche that you could address, which the banks or the existing financial services players could not address. Now, what's happened though in the last 2-3 years is, with these new players coming in, it's not just about niche. These large players also bring an element of scale, right? When they bring in an element of scale, now, while NBFCs have been focused on finding that specialization, that balance between achieving scale and specialization is something which is a hard balance to kind of achieve. With that in context, if I have to now flip this over and look at it from a customer's financial needs point of view, and I look at the prism of a typical Maslow's hierarchy of financial needs. At the most bottom is, of course, payments, right? Then, of course, you've got your borrowing, you've got your investments, insurance, wealth management, etc. If you look at this prism, and it's got two sides to it, at the most bottom end, it's the most basic need for a customer, right? Which is transactions. I need to be able to transact financially. But if you look at it from an industry point of view, while that's broad-based in the large market, that's a market which is obviously going towards low margins, or I would say no margins now, right? And inherently, there's a downward pressure with the consumer and the internet coming in across this entire hierarchy, which means while payments is already a no-margin business, even the rest of the layers are tending towards a downward pressure. Now, the reason for it is fairly simple. If you look at every other business which is doing some business of some form and have achieved scale, they are offering financial services as a value-added service to their customers. And some very well-known examples, right? If you look at somebody like a taxi aggregator, he is offering loans to his driver partners to be able to build some kind of a loyalty and trust. At the same time, he's also being able to offer EMIs to his consumers. If you look at e-commerce players, they've got platform businesses and marketplaces. They are offering loans to their sellers to be able to build some kind of a loyalty and some kind of a stickiness with their seller base. So on the consumer side as well. That's true with telcos as well, right? You've got telcos offering payment services, building payment wallets, hoping that there is some kind of a stickiness that you build with your customer base. Now, what's happening with this play and this additional factor that's come in the last few years is, these players don't really want to make money lending and borrowing, right? It's more about offering financial services as an additional service to their customer base to enhance value, which means they have the ability to absorb those margins and really drive that market further towards a zero margin kind of a business. It doesn't mean that the market is over. It just means that in this new landscape, it's pretty much all about a platform business rather than finding that niche and building a high margin business, which was the case earlier, or building a business where you're trying to expand your margins, right? In this new paradigm, it's all about building platforms or collaborating with platforms, right? Just look at what's happened in this new industry. Internet coming in, a typical financial services, which possibly was more of a high touch, high margin business, is naturally tending towards low volume, or rather high volume, low margin, but a low touch, self-service kind of a model, right? You also see that the delivery medium is more and more of internet. You also see that earlier it was about monetizing transactions, but today it's pretty much more about monetizing data, right? You're not looking at, do I increase profitability of every transaction? Possibly no. But can I monetize this data to be able to possibly sell more or sell something else? Yes, that's the way you would want to look at your business, right? So the way you start looking at your business is very different. The third play here is, it's not about just creating that niche and creating a business on a standalone basis. It's also about partnerships, right? And partnerships are here to stay, whether you're a large player or a small player or a very niche player focused on any specific area. Now, what happens with this new world of partnerships is, it's not about what you foresee is going to happen over the next few years. It's your ability to move fast when something new comes up in the market, right? That's going to be the differentiator that you want to rather focus on, right? Because these changes in the market are here to stay. So which means you would rather want to focus on building competencies which will help you move faster rather than trying to crystal gaze and see what's going to happen. What does it mean? What does it leave as a business that you would want to focus on? We believe you'd want to focus on building your capabilities, for example, in the space of data analytics. When I say monetize data, you already have a lot of financial services players doing it, and increasingly that's going to be the trend where can I improve my underwriting process by using data which is not just the typical credit bureau data or the customer application form that I have, but a ton of third-party sources. Can those sources be evolving over a period of time rather than a static source being, you know what, today I look at Facebook data and Twitter data and that's sufficient. Possibly there's going to be a third source of data which is going to come over the next couple of months, and your ability to adapt to that faster is going to be a differentiator rather than you forcing what's going to come, because you possibly will never be able to foresee what is going to come. Now, the second aspect, of course, a downstream application of that is how do you build your machine learning capabilities? How do you do artificial intelligence, right? Now, cloud pretty much enables you to build these competencies. You can choose to hire the best data scientists from a Cornell or an MIT and try and build those models on your own, or cloud essentially allows you to use some of those APIs automatically to use the existing machine learning models and apply it to your business and focus on the business rules of your machine learning algorithms or machine learning models rather than the core algorithm itself, right? Cloud just enables you to be able to do that. Frugality and automation, right? And this is something that's very close to heart within Amazon for us internally. What I mean by frugality is, now that you can't foresee what's going to happen, I would rather try a lot of experiments, but my cost of failure of those experiments has to be extremely low, which means I could try 10 experiments. Even if 8 or 9 fail, that should be perfectly fine for your business. You should not be left with the collateral damage of those failures. That 1 or 2 successes out of those 10 experiments that you conduct should be enough for you to be able to propel your business ahead and continue to try 10 more experiments, which means each of those projects are not $1 million project. Right? These are projects which are extremely frugal. You're spending a very small amount of time. You're testing a hypothesis. If you see that the customers are adopting, it's improving your business, you're getting customers, then you double down on investments on that project. If not, just back off and try a new experiment. Again, cloud as a platform just allows you to do all of those 3 or 4 things that I spoke about. Right? Now, an example of this platform play, right? This is something that we already know is here to stay or is possibly going to dominate the payment space in the next couple of years. If you look at traditionally, payments was dominated by players in the cards space, right? The credit cards, the debit card players, and the merchant issuers. But today, it's pretty much about these players on the left-hand side of the slide who've just about emerged in the last 18 months, 24 months. For them, it's not about monetizing the transaction. If you look at somebody like a Facebook or a WhatsApp, it's more about if I can serve one better ad to that consumer base, I can actually fund 10 possible transactions of financial transactions, right? So it's never about profitability of a transaction itself. And this is a world that is here to stay. And I believe that even things like lending, advances, wealth management, all of it is going to go in this direction, which is a platform play. Now, if this is true, answering that what question, what can you do with cloud, right? If this is something that you agree with me or partially agree with me with respect to where the market is moving. You can do a ton of things with respect to cloud. But frankly, the question that you would want to ask is, as a culture within your organization, are you cloud ready? Rather than just about technology. It's not about just moving your applications to the cloud and saying, you know what, everything of mine is in the cloud, we are a cloud-first organization. Not really. Does your team think cloud? Does your team think experiments? Does your team think the time taken to deliver a new project is 6 months or is it 2 weeks? Right? That's the question that you would want to go back and ask your organizations or ask those questions in your committee meetings. Right? I can give you examples here. Migrating core systems, yes, you could pretty much run anything in the cloud today. But the question to ask is, for example, let's assume you're looking at a new core system that you're trying to possibly evaluate or purchase. Maybe about 10 years back, you would ask the question, who else in the NBFC space is running this application? If top 5 players are already using this application, the probability of you buying it was obviously high. Frankly, in today's world, the question you would want to ask is, if this is a new application or a new solution, is it something that people have already done, or is it something that I am going to be the first to be doing? That's a question that you would want to ask. Rather than looking at, if the market has already done it, then it's not going to give you a competitive advantage. Right? That's true about blockchain, that's true about analytics, that's true about anything new in the technology that you see. Now, is your technology team ready to be able to embrace this culture is something that you would want to go back and ask. Right? And cloud pretty much enables you to do it. I'd like to give a quick example here. Look at your core systems and ask yourself a question, at what rate are you changing your products? When I say product, it could be a mobile app where a customer is applying for a loan. It could be a product looking at his portfolio on the phone. The reason you would want to ask that question is that's the question that's most relevant to customers, because customer is comparing his experience of dealing with you on your platform the way he deals with a chat application, an e-commerce application, or possibly a food ordering application, right? Which means the rate at which you change your platforms is possibly more important than how well you've built your platform itself. And that's a bit of a blasphemous statement sometimes to make in a very traditional organization. But that's important. I'll give you an example. If I have to ask anybody in this room as to how fast do your core applications change, the answer that we usually receive is, oh, you know what, a few years back, we used to make a change every 1 or 2 months with a downtime, but now we are able to make changes to our applications once a week with maybe a little bit of a downtime on a Sunday morning, right? But if you look at from a customer experience point of view, what are you comparing yourself with? Somebody like an Ola, which is a taxi booking application, they make about 30 production changes every day to their systems, because they're constantly hearing to customers, they're improving their application, they're making changes on the fly without customer really experiencing any bottleneck or any downtime. That's the way you would want to design your systems. Cloud essentially allows you to be able to do that, right? Rather than anything else. So the question is not about operational efficiency, availability, all of those things naturally come with the cloud, but your ability to make a very fast change is something that you would want to keep at the core of your organization, and cloud enables you to do that. I spoke about core systems, so I really won't spend too much time talking about core systems, but the message here is you can do a ton of use cases today on the cloud, including the core systems, and it's not about just putting one mobile app on the cloud, it's not about doing a peripheral analytics project on the cloud, it's pretty much trying to do everything on the cloud, because that brings that cloud culture, that brings that culture of experimentation within an organization. Now, while you do all of this, there are some interesting things happening, and I'm sure you've heard about this earlier, right, with respect to AI and ML. These are platforms which allow you to consume the same kind of algorithms which somebody, for example, like a Google or an Amazon has built to build their own recommendation engines at the back end, right? And there are two aspects to using machine learning and artificial intelligence within organizations. One is the outside the boundary of an organization, which is your customer engagement points. And the second is inside, which is more about processes and technology and automation that you could do, right? And there's a ton of innovation happening on both sides. Frankly, a lot of focus goes on the customer side of things in terms of building chatbots or building some kind of a automated way of engaging with the customers. But really, a lot of process automation is happening behind the scenes as well, within the walls of the organization. I can give you a quick example. One of the banks that I was talking to recently, just about a few weeks back, the bank has an account closing process, right? And account closing process is pretty much a non-revenue activity for a bank, but it's an essential activity. They had about 10 people doing that as a back-end process, right? You've got all these forms coming in at the branch level. It comes in, they check the forms, they check what the account status is there a balance, how do you transfer the balance, and so on and so forth, and complete the account closing process, which used to take a few days. And frankly, a customer who wants to close the account, you would rather give him also a good experience because he's still a potential customer for you. Now, this bank essentially used ML and AI to automate that process, and today, that account closing process, which is, it may seem like a very insignificant process, has come down to a few hours, but the better part is, instead of 10 people doing that job, there are only 2 people doing that job, which means 90% of it is automated in a way, but those 2 people are for those edge cases which can't be automated, right? Those are the process improvements that AI and ML bring in, and that's what you would want to start thinking about in your organizations. Voice, right? We all know about mobile first world. India is a mobile first world. We've heard all of it for the last 10 years, in fact. But if we have to look at the future, at least within Amazon, we believe that voice is going to be one of those biggest things that is going to disrupt this market. I wouldn't say disrupt is a wrong word and pretty much a misused word today, but more the way you engage with the customers is going to be more of voice than anything else, because it just reduces the friction between me having to open a mobile app, make some clicks, and then interact with a service, to voice where it's sitting in possibly my drawing hall or on my phone, but I can talk and converse with it, right? Alexa is something that we've launched just about last week, incidentally, in India as well. But think of consumer services which are getting integrated with voice platforms like Alexa, right? In the US, you can say, hey Alexa, when is my credit card due? Hey Alexa, what's the due? Hey Alexa, on the 23rd of this month, how much did I spend on food, on restaurants? Right? These are the questions that your customers would want to start asking. And you would want to be there when your customers start wanting to interact with you in these mediums. It's very, very simple to be able to build and integrate your applications to work with something like an Alexa. Now, while having said all of this, for the last couple of minutes, I just want to touch upon security, because this is the most obvious question that comes up as to, is cloud secure? Frankly, as a cloud service provider, security is priority number 0 for us, which means it's the absolute highest priority, because if we don't offer a secure platform, we don't have a business, right? We can't afford any kind of breaches, and we have to invest the maximum in technology than anybody else could do as a single enterprise. Now, what it means is, while the sophistication of threats is increasing, as the gentleman before me was talking about, given that we've got the ability to invest more, we are able to actually foresee a lot of it and invest ahead of the time from a technology point of view, right? AWS essentially provides the same familiar tools. So one of the issues that comes up is, look, my guys in IT are already trained using a particular set of technologies, firewalls, etc. Frankly, cloud pretty much allows you to use the similar technologies even on the cloud. It's not like you're going to be using completely new skills or new technologies. You could reuse a lot of that. It's just that from a responsibility point of view, security has now moved from completely being my responsibility, which was you as an end customer, to a shared responsibility, which means a part of the responsibilities are now of that cloud provider. Essentially things like securing your servers, your storage, your data centers, all of that security is something that belongs to the cloud provider. Additionally, tools that you require, things like firewall, things like how do I secure my network, all of that are tools provided by a cloud provider to you. You just need to make sure you configure it correctly, rather than going outside to buy additional products for it. You can of course reuse some of the products that you've already bought as well, right? Now, while security is something that is obviously extremely important and it's a priority 0 for us, we've had customers about 6 or 7 years back questioning as to cloud is secure or not, but increasingly we are seeing now large organizations moving to the cloud because it helps them improve their security posture, right? And I'm underlining that line. It helps you improve your security posture as to what it is today with your normal data center because of all of these technologies that are available. It's not just we making that statement, even the regulatory world is kind of realizing that and recognizing it and actually encouraging industries to move to cloud, right? As an example, somebody like a MAS, which is the financial regulator of Singapore, has come out with guidelines to really encourage financial services to adopt cloud. As to what should be the controls, what will be their audit mechanisms, all of them have been defined by MAS so that it makes it easier for financial services to adopt cloud. We're seeing the same trend in India as well. As an example, we've got IDRBT recently releasing their cloud FAQs, where they clearly call out that banks can benefit from far greater security postures in the cloud than they can achieve in traditional data centers, right? The kind of audit controls, the kind of certifications that a cloud provider can go through is obviously much, much higher than what you could do on an individual basis. And that's something that's available for you as a service as part of the cloud platform. Now, without taking much time, while I kind of covered, to summarize, I essentially covered what you could do with the cloud, why it's important to bring that cloud culture within your organization, why cloud essentially democratizes technology completely, right? Which means I can build a great ML AI-based platform, the example that I spoke about of a large bank, at a very low cost, and I don't need $1 million to be able to invest that. Because I could try, if my transaction volume is 100,000, I'll be paying that much compared to a bank which has got a 10 million transaction volumes, right? I don't need to necessarily pay a large price just because my scale is smaller in the cloud. Now, an innovative example that you'd want to look at is somebody like a Bajaj Finserv. They're trying to transform their business. They've been doing very well over the last 10 years in financial services and in the NBFC space, any which ways. But over the last couple of years, they've done a lot of innovative things with the cloud. As an example, you might have heard about their EMI network with respect to they building their entire cards business and an EMI network with respect to online purchases. They're also building a digital lending platform to be able to reach their customers completely online rather than only use the distribution channel. Some of these things and some of these innovations which are completely data-driven, analytics-driven is all built using the cloud. Feel free to have a chat with me offline during lunch, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you. Thank you, guys.